The sound of hammering echoed through the dusty main street of Greeley, Colorado, drawing curious glances from townsfolk who weren't accustomed to seeing a woman wielding tools with such confidence. Zara Patterson stood tall despite her modest height, her determined eyes focused on the weathered notice board as she secured her advertisement with precise strikes. Her honey-colored hair was pulled back in a practical braid, wisps escaping to frame her sun-kissed face as she worked, oblivious to the stares and whispers growing around her. "Madam, you might want to let a man handle that," called out the storekeeper from his porch, amusement evident in his voice. Those delicate hands weren't made for such rough work. A few bystanders chuckled, and soon a small crowd had gathered to witness the spectacle of a woman with a hammer. Zara merely squared her shoulders and continued her task, driving the final nail with a forceful blow that silenced the onlookers momentarily. "These hands built half the furniture in my father's house," she replied calmly, tucking the hammer into the tool belt slung low on her hips. "And they'll build me a life here just the same." The year was 1875, and Greeley was still growing, a testament to the pioneering spirit that had pushed Americans westward for decades. What had started as a Union colony experiment in temperance and agriculture 7 years prior was now a proper town with aspirations of greatness, though it retained the rugged edges of frontier life. Zara stepped back to admire her handiwork. The notice declared in neat, careful lettering, "Carpentry Services Z. Patterson. Furniture made, repairs done. Inquire at Widow Simmons' boarding house." She'd arrived just 3 days ago with little more than her tools, her savings, and a promise to her dying father that she would make something of herself. A lady carpenter. A man's incredulous voice cut through her thoughts. "That's about as useful as a wagon without wheels." More laughter rippled through the gathering crowd. Zara tightened her grip on her hammer, her knuckles whitening, but she kept her expression neutral. 5 years of working alongside her father had taught her that her skills would always speak louder than any retort. "I reckon the lady thinks she can do a man's job," another voice joined in. "Next thing you know, she'll be wanting to vote." The laughter grew louder, emboldening the hecklers. Zara gathered her remaining notices and turned to leave when a tall figure emerged from the crowd, silencing them with his presence alone. Hayes Vaughn stood a head taller than most men in town, his broad shoulders and confident stance marking him as someone accustomed to commanding respect. His dark beard was neatly trimmed, framing a face weathered by years under the unforgiving western sun. Despite his imposing appearance, there was a surprising gentleness in his blue eyes as they met Zara's defiant gaze. "Folks around here could use a reminder about manners," he said, his voice carrying easily across the now quieting street. "And perhaps about not judging a craftsman or craftswoman before seeing their work." Hayes stepped closer to the notice board, examining Zara's advertisement with genuine interest. "Fine lettering," he observed. "Steady hand." "Thank you," Zara replied cautiously, unsure whether to expect another joke at her expense. Hayes turned to face the crowd, his expression serious. "As it happens, I've been looking for someone with carpentry skills. My cattle operation's doing well enough that I'm looking to build a proper home." His gaze returned to Zara, a hint of challenge in his eyes. "They laughed when she carried a hammer, but I say, then she'll build my home." The declaration sent a murmur of surprise through the onlookers. Hayes Vaughn wasn't just any rancher, he owned the largest spread within 20 miles of Greeley. His approval meant something, even if it was being bestowed upon such an unconventional recipient. Zara studied his face, searching for any sign of mockery, but found none. "Mr. Vaughn, if you're serious about hiring me, I'd be happy to discuss terms." "Dead serious, Miss Patterson," he replied, tipping his hat. "I've been putting it off too long. My foreman's cabin is more comfortable than the shack I've been calling home." The crowd began to disperse. Their entertainment concluded for the moment, though Zara could still hear muttered comments about impropriety and unnatural ambitions. She ignored them, focusing instead on this unexpected opportunity. "I'll need to see the site," she said, "and discuss your requirements. Of course, I can take you out to the ranch tomorrow if that suits." Hayes offered his hand, and Zara shook it firmly, noting the calluses that matched her own. 9 o'clock. I'll come by the Widow Simmons' place." "I'll be ready," Zara confirmed, trying to contain her excitement. A major commission in her first week in town was more than she dared hope for. As Hayes walked away, Zara couldn't help but wonder about his motivations. Was this genuine interest in her skills, or merely an act of charity, or worse, some kind of joke? Either way, she was determined to prove herself, just as she had done countless times before. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of Colorado day that showcased the majesty of the nearby Rocky Mountains. Zara was waiting on the porch of the boarding house well before 9, dressed in her most practical skirt and blouse, with her measuring tools and sketch paper packed in her father's old satchel. Her tool belt and larger implements were carefully wrapped in canvas, ready to be loaded onto whatever conveyance Mr. Vaughn would provide. Widow Simmons poked her head out the front door, her round face creased with concern. "Miss Patterson, are you certain this is wise?" A young woman, alone with a bachelor rancher. "We'll be discussing business, Mrs. Simmons," Zara assured her, "and I suspect Mr. Vaughn values his reputation in town too much to behave improperly." The widow didn't look convinced. "Your father would expect me to look out for you." "He was a good man. God rest his soul." "Yes, he was," Zara agreed softly, "and he raised me to take care of myself." Before Mrs. Simmons could protest further, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Hayes Vaughn's arrival. He drove a sturdy wagon pulled by two well-matched bay horses, slowing to a halt in front of the boarding house with practiced ease. "Miss Patterson," he greeted, jumping down from the seat. "I see you're ready." "Mr. Vaughn," Zara nodded, gathering her belongings. "Good morning." Hayes took the heavier bundle of tools from her, eyebrows rising slightly at the weight. "Impressive collection," he commented, loading them into the back of the wagon. "My father believed in quality craftsmanship," she replied. "Good tools are an investment. A wise man, your father. He was." Hayes helped Zara onto the wagon seat with a steady hand before climbing up beside her. With a gentle flick of the reins, they were off, the town of Greeley soon giving way to open countryside. As they traveled, Hayes explained his vision for the house. "Nothing too fancy," he insisted, "but solid. Built to last. I started with 40 acres and a dream 7 years ago. Now the V runs cattle on over 2,000 acres. Time I had a home that reflects that success." "How many rooms will you require?" Zara asked, already sketching preliminary ideas. 4 bedrooms, I reckon," Hayes replied. "A proper kitchen, dining room, parlor, maybe a study." Zara glanced at him, pencil pausing mid-stroke. "That's quite a house for a single man." Hayes kept his eyes on the road, but a faint color rose in his cheeks above his beard. "I'm thinking of the future, Miss Patterson. A man doesn't build an empire just to enjoy it alone." The implication hung in the air between them. Zara returned to her sketching, ignoring the strange flutter in her chest at his words. "Well, a house like that will take considerable time and materials. Have you thought about where you'll source the lumber? There's a sawmill in Fort Collins that can provide what we need. I've already spoken with them." "And what about workers? I'm skilled, Mr. Vaughn, but a project of this scale requires more than one person. Hayes nodded. I've got 6 ranch hands who can help with the heavy lifting under your direction, and I thought we might hire 2 or 3 men from town who have experience in building. You've given this some thought, Zara observed, impressed despite herself. I don't make decisions lightly, Miss Patterson. When I commit to something, I see it through. They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic clop of hooves and creak of wagon wheels the only sounds accompanying them. Zara found her gaze drawn repeatedly to Hayes's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he squinted against the sun. After about an hour, they crested a gentle rise, and Hayes pulled the wagon to a stop. "There it is," he said with quiet pride. V. Below them stretched a verdant valley, bisected by a winding creek. Cattle dotted the landscape, grazing contentedly on lush grass. Near the center of the property stood a collection of buildings, a barn, corrals, bunkhouse, and what must be the foreman's cabin Hayes had mentioned. Off to one side, on a small rise overlooking the creek, was a crude one-room structure that seemed out of place amidst the otherwise well-maintained ranch. "Your current home," Zara guessed, nodding toward the shack. "Such as it is," Hayes admitted. "I put all the profits back into the ranch for years. Lived in a tent the first summer. This was an improvement. And where would you like the new house built?" Hayes pointed to a spot not far from where they stood. "Right here. Best view on the property. Close enough to the operations for convenience, but far enough for some privacy." Zara climbed down from the wagon, walking the area with a critical eye. The location was indeed perfect, level enough for building, with good drainage, and as Hayes had said, commanding views in all directions. "The soil seems stable," she noted, kneeling to examine the ground. "We'll need to dig test holes to be certain, but I think the foundation won't present any unusual challenges." Hayes watched her with undisguised interest as she paced off dimensions, made notes, and occasionally paused to take in the surroundings. "You know your business, don't you?" he remarked. "I should," Zara replied without looking up from her notebook. "I've been learning it since I was 12 years old. Most girls that age are learning to cook and sew. I can do those things too," she said, "but I was an only child and my father needed help after my mother died. He taught me what he knew." Hayes was silent for a moment. "My condolences about your parents. Thank you." Zara straightened up, tucking her pencil behind her ear. "It's been 5 years since my mother passed, and my father followed her this past winter, pneumonia." "That's what brought you to Colorado, a fresh start," Zara nodded. "That, and I heard the air out here is good for the lungs. I didn't want to meet the same fate." Hayes gestured toward the wagon. "Let me show you the rest of the ranch, and then we can discuss specifics over lunch." The next few hours were spent touring the property. Hayes introduced Zara to his foreman, a grizzled older man named Frank, who seemed skeptical of her presence but polite enough. The ranch hands they encountered were similarly reserved in their judgment, though Zara was accustomed to such reactions. By midday, they had returned to Hayes's modest cabin for a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold beef. Sitting across from him at his rough-hewn table, Zara felt an unexpected ease in his company. "I think I understand what you're looking for," she said, spreading out her preliminary sketches. "Something like this, perhaps?" Hayes leaned forward, studying the drawings with intent concentration. "This is remarkable work," he said finally. "You've captured exactly what I had in mind. I can refine the plans further, of course, and we'll need to discuss budget and timeline." "Money isn't the primary concern," Hayes said, tracing the outline of the house with one finger. "Getting it right is. This will be where I put down permanent roots. Where I—" He paused, then continued more carefully. Where future generations of Vaughns might grow up. Zara felt that strange flutter again and busied herself with organizing her papers. I understand. A family home should be built to last. Speaking of which, I'd recommend pine for the basic framing, but oak for the main supports and flooring. More expensive but worth it for durability. I trust your judgment, Hayes said simply. When can you start? I'll need a week to finalize the plans and order materials, Zara calculated. After that, assuming the weather cooperates, we could begin with the foundation. Then it's settled. Hayes extended his hand across the table. You've got yourself a job, Miss Patterson. As Zara shook his hand, she couldn't help but feel that her new life in Colorado was beginning in a way she never could have anticipated. The skeptical faces in town couldn't touch her now she had work to do, a house to build, and the confidence of a man who, unlike so many others, seemed to value her skills above her gender. What she didn't yet realize was how significantly Hayes Vaughn would feature in her future, not just as an employer, but as something far more profound. The following week passed in a blur of activity for Zara. She spent her days refining the house plans, consulting with Hayes on details ranging from the height of doorways to the placement of windows. Each evening found her bent over her sketches at the small desk in her boarding house room, working by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy. Word of her commission spread quickly through Greeley. Some reactions were predictably dismissive, poor Vaughn must be desperate for help, or wait till she breaks a nail and quits, but others were cautiously supportive. The local mercantile owner, seeing a potential customer, was suddenly much more solicitous, offering to order any specialized supplies she might need. On Saturday morning, as Zara was purchasing drafting paper, she overheard a conversation between two matrons that made her pause. "It's simply not proper," one woman insisted in a carrying whisper. "A young, unmarried woman spending so much time alone with Mr. Vaughn, people will talk." "People already are talking," her companion replied. "Though I must say it's about time someone caught his eye. He's been alone too long since Sarah passed. But a carpenter, what does that say about his judgment? Perhaps he sees something in her the rest of us don't." Zara moved away, her cheeks burning. She hadn't considered how her professional relationship with Hayes might be perceived. More importantly, she hadn't known he was a widower. The revelation added a layer of complexity to her understanding of him, his solitude, his focus on the future, his determination to build a family home. That afternoon, as they met at the land office to finalize some paperwork, Zara found herself studying Hayes with new awareness. There was a gravity to him she hadn't fully appreciated before, a depth of experience etched in the lines around his eyes. "Is something troubling you, Miss Patterson?" Hayes asked as they walked back toward the boarding house. "You seem preoccupied." Zara hesitated, then decided directness was best. "I heard something today that surprised me. I didn't know you'd been married before." Hayes's stride faltered slightly before resuming. "Yes," he said quietly. "Sarah and I married young back in Kansas. She came west with me to start the ranch. Died of fever the second year." "I'm sorry," Zara offered, feeling inadequate in the face of his loss. "It was a long time ago," Hayes replied, though something in his voice suggested the wound wasn't entirely healed. "Nearly 6 years now." They walked in silence for a moment before he continued. "I should have mentioned it earlier. Sarah is part of why this house is so important to me. I promised her we'd have a proper home someday. I couldn't give her that, but I can still honor the promise." The simple dignity in his words moved Zara unexpectedly. "We'll build her a house to be proud of," she said softly. Hayes's gaze, when it met hers, held a warmth that reached beyond professional appreciation. "Thank you for understanding." As they reached the boarding house, another thought occurred to Zara. "Mr. Vaughn, I've just realized that my working for you might cause talk about propriety." Hayes's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Miss Patterson, I believe you've already demonstrated your willingness to defy convention. As for me, I've never put much stock in town gossip. But," he added more seriously, "if it concerns you, we could take steps to ensure your reputation remains intact. Perhaps Mrs. Simmons could accompany you to the ranch occasionally." "That won't be necessary," Zara assured him, somewhat relieved by his pragmatic approach. "I just wanted to be sure you were aware." "I appreciate your consideration," Hayes said. "But I hired you for your skills, not to provide fodder for gossip. Let them talk if they must." With that settled, their work began in earnest the following Monday. The foundation was marked out, test holes dug, and the first delivery of lumber arrived from Fort Collins. Hayes introduced Zara to the 3 men he'd hired from town to assist with the construction. Experienced builders named Joseph, Thomas, and Elijah. Their initial skepticism about taking direction from a woman was palpable, but Zara had faced such attitudes before. She simply went about her work with quiet confidence, demonstrating rather than arguing. By the end of the first day, when she corrected a measurement error that would have caused problems later, Joseph grudgingly admitted she knew her business. "Where'd you learn to spot that kind of thing?" he asked as they packed up tools for the evening. "My father was meticulous about precision," Zara explained. "He always said mistakes in the beginning become disasters in the end." "Smart man," Joseph nodded. "I'm beginning to see why Mr. Vaughn hired you." That first acknowledgement of her competence felt like a victory, small but significant. Over the days that followed, as the foundation took shape and the frame of the house began to rise against the Colorado sky, the workers' resistance gradually gave way to respect. Hayes was a constant presence, though he never interfered with Zara's authority over the project. He would arrive early in the morning to check on progress, then attend to ranch business before returning in the afternoon. Sometimes he simply watched the construction, his expression contemplative as walls rose where once there had been only open prairie. One evening, as Zara was checking measurements against her plans, she noticed Hayes standing at the edge of the building site, silhouetted against the setting sun. She approached him, dusting sawdust from her apron. "We're making good progress," she said. "The frame should be complete within the week, weather permitting." Hayes nodded, his gaze still fixed on the skeleton of his future home. "It's strange," he mused, "watching something you've imagined for so long start to take physical form." "Second thoughts?" Zara asked, suddenly concerned. "No." Hayes turned to her with a smile that transformed his solemn features. "Quite the opposite. It already feels more like home than that shack ever did." "You're bringing it to life exactly as I hoped." His approval warmed Zara more than it should have. "I'm glad you're pleased with the work." "More than pleased," Hayes assured her. He hesitated, then added, "Would you join me for supper? Nothing fancy. Frank's wife cooks for me most nights. But I'd like to discuss some ideas for the interior." Zara considered the invitation. The sun was setting, and she was tired and hungry after a long day's work. The propriety concerns still existed, but Hayes had been nothing but respectful, and Frank and his wife would be present. "I'd be happy to," she decided. Dinner was indeed a simple affair: beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie, but the company made it memorable. Frank's wife, Martha, was a friendly, no-nonsense woman who seemed delighted to have another female at the table. The conversation flowed easily from ranch matters to the progress of the house to stories of their respective pasts. "So you really built furniture with your father?" Martha asked, clearly fascinated. "Since you were a girl." "I did," Zara confirmed. "We had a small shop in Illinois." My father specialized in fine cabinetry, but we did everything from cradles to coffins. And you were good at it, Hayes observed. It wasn't a question. I was, Zara acknowledged without false modesty. My hands are smaller than a man's, which can be an advantage for detailed work. And I have a good eye for proportion. I've noticed, Hayes said quietly. Their eyes met briefly across the table before Frank launched into a story about a disastrous attempt at building his own chicken coop, lightening the moment. After dinner, Hayes walked Zara to the wagon that would take her back to town. The night was clear and cool, stars emerging in the vast Colorado sky. "Thank you for today," Hayes said as he helped her up to the seat, "for everything you're doing here." "It's my job," Zara reminded him, though they both knew her investment in the project had become more than professional. "It's more than that," Hayes replied. "You're building something that matters, to me and—" He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. "Just know that I'm grateful." As the wagon pulled away, Zara found herself wondering what Hayes had been about to say. "To me, and to my future family." The thought brought a complex mix of emotions she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The weeks that followed saw remarkable progress on the house. The frame was completed, the roof raised and shingled, and exterior walls went up with methodical precision. Inside, floors were laid and interior walls erected, dividing the space into the rooms Zara had so carefully designed. As summer deepened toward autumn, the basic structure was complete, and the finer work began installing windows and doors, building cabinets and shelves, creating the details that would transform a structure into a home. Zara found herself spending more time at the ranch than in town, often staying until sunset to finish a particular task. Her relationship with Hayes evolved alongside the house. Their discussions about the project frequently gave way to more personal conversations about books they had read, places they had seen, dreams they still harbored. Hayes revealed a thoughtful intellect behind his practical rancher's exterior, while Zara gradually let him see beyond her professional competence to the woman beneath. One afternoon in late September, they were inspecting the newly installed kitchen cabinets when Hayes suddenly asked, "Why carpentry, Zara? You're clearly intelligent enough for any profession. Why choose this path?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it momentarily distracted her from his question. It wasn't really a choice," she finally replied. "It was what I knew, what I was good at. After my father died, it was all I had left of him, in a way." Hayes nodded in understanding. "And now, is it still about your father, or has it become your own passion?" The question made Zara realize something she hadn't fully articulated before. "It's mine now," she said slowly. "I love creating something lasting, something useful. There's an honesty to working with wood. It doesn't lie to you or judge you. It simply responds to how you treat it. Like people should be," Hayes observed. "But rarely are," Zara added with a wry smile. Hayes leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those perceptive blue eyes. "You've faced a lot of judgment, haven't you, for choosing this path?" "Some," Zara acknowledged. "Though I've been fortunate in many ways. My father supported me. And now—" She gestured around the kitchen they stood in, evidence of her current good fortune. "And now you have a patron who appreciates your talent," Hayes finished for her, his tone lightening. "Exactly. Though I hope to establish my own business properly once this project is complete, perhaps even open a shop in town." "You should," Hayes encouraged. "Greeley needs more people like you, skilled, determined, unafraid to challenge expectations." His approval shouldn't have mattered so much, but it did. Zara found herself inexplicably pleased by his faith in her abilities. As October arrived with its crisp mornings and golden afternoons, The house neared completion. Zara focused on the finer details: the carved newel post on the staircase, the built-in bookshelves in the study, the window seats in the upstairs bedrooms. Each element represented hours of careful work, transforming Hayes's vision into reality. One Saturday, Zara arrived to find Hayes waiting for her with 2 saddled horses. "I thought we might ride out today," he suggested. "There's something I'd like to show you." Curious, Zara agreed. She was a competent rider, having learned as a girl in Illinois, though she hadn't had many opportunities since arriving in Colorado. Hayes led her away from the ranch, following the creek that wound through his property until they reached a secluded grove of cottonwoods. "This is my thinking place," Hayes explained as they dismounted. "When decisions need making or problems need solving, I come here." The spot was undeniably beautiful, sheltered, peaceful, with the gentle sound of flowing water and dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. "It's lovely," Zara said sincerely. "Thank you for sharing it." Hayes spread a blanket on the ground and they sat together, enjoying the tranquility. He produced a small parcel of food from his saddlebag: bread, cheese, apples, which they shared in companionable silence. "I've been thinking about the house," Hayes said finally, "about what happens when it's finished." "You'll have a beautiful home," Zara replied, uncertain where he was leading. "Yes, but—" Hayes seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "A house isn't truly a home without people to fill it." Zara's heart quickened. "I'm sure you'll find someone suitable," she said carefully. "A man in your position would be considered quite eligible." Hayes turned to face her directly. "Zara, I think you misunderstand me. I'm not speaking hypothetically." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying that watching you these past months, your skill, your dedication, your spirit has affected me in ways I didn't anticipate. I find myself thinking of you not just as the builder of my house, but as—" He paused, searching for words. "As someone who might share it with me." Zara stared at him, speechless. Of all the possible outcomes she had imagined for this project, this declaration wasn't one she had seriously considered. "I know this might seem sudden," Hayes continued in her silence. "And I'm not asking for an immediate answer, but I wanted you to know that my admiration has grown into something deeper, something I haven't felt since Sarah." "Hayes, Zara began, then stopped, emotions conflicting within her. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" he asked gently. "Haven't you felt it too? The connection between us?" Zara couldn't deny that she had. Their conversations, their shared vision for the house, the comfort she found in his presence, all had been building towards something that transcended their professional relationship. But fear held her back. "What about my work?" she asked. "Would you expect me to give up carpentry if we were together?" Hayes looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Of course not. Your skill is part of who you are, part of what I admire. I would never ask you to abandon that." Relief washed over her, followed by a surge of other emotions she couldn't immediately sort through. "I need time," she said finally, "to think." "Take all the time you need," Hayes assured her. "The house won't be finished for several more weeks. I'm not going anywhere." They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence, the day's revelation changing the tenor of their relationship in ways that couldn't be undone. As Hayes helped Zara onto the wagon that would return her to town, their hands touched longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of possibilities now open before them. The following weeks were both wonderful and torturous for Zara. She continued her work on the house with undiminished skill and dedication, but every interaction with Hayes now carried additional weight. He was true to his word, never pressing her for an answer, yet his feelings were evident in small gestures: a steadying hand when she climbed a ladder, fresh coffee waiting when she arrived in the mornings, genuine interest in every aspect of her work and thoughts. Meanwhile, the house transformed from a construction site to a true home. Walls were painted in warm colors, floors polished to a rich glow, fixtures installed with care. Each room took on its intended character, the study masculine and practical, the parlor inviting and elegant, the bedrooms peaceful retreats. As the project neared completion, Zara found herself lingering after the other workers had left, making minor adjustments or simply absorbing the atmosphere of the place she had helped create. One evening in early November, she was alone in the parlor, hanging curtains she had selected, when Hayes appeared in the doorway. "Those are perfect," he said, admiring the deep blue fabric against the cream-colored walls. "You have an excellent eye for color." "Thank you," Zara replied, smoothing the fabric. "They'll catch the morning light beautifully." Hayes moved into the room, standing beside her to view the effect. "The whole house is beautiful, Zara, better than I imagined." "I'm glad you're pleased," she said, acutely aware of his proximity. "More than pleased," he corrected. Then, more hesitantly, "Have you had time to consider what we discussed?" "I don't mean to pressure you, but I have," Zara interrupted, turning to face him. "I've thought of little else." And Hayes's expression was carefully controlled, but hope flickered in his eyes. Zara took a deep breath. "I've never been one for traditional paths. My whole life has been about making my own way, following my own judgment, and my judgment tells me—" She paused, gathering courage. "My judgment tells me that what's growing between us is worth exploring." The hope in Hayes's eyes bloomed into joy. "Is that a yes?" "It's a beginning," Zara clarified. "I'm not ready to make permanent decisions yet, but I'm willing to see where this leads." Hayes reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. "That's all I ask, a chance." "There will be talk," Zara warned. "The carpenter and the rancher." "Let them talk," Hayes said dismissively. "Those who matter will see what I see, a remarkable woman who carries a hammer and builds more than houses." His words warmed her through. "And what does this remarkable woman build, Mr. Vaughn?" she asked, a smile playing at her lips. "Futures, Miss Patterson," he replied softly. "Possibilities. Dreams." With gentle deliberation, Hayes leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, questioning at first, then deepening as Zara responded. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that for quite some time," Hayes admitted. "I'm glad you waited until now," Zara replied. "Until I was ready." They stood together in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the home they had created, the first of many dreams they might build together. The next few weeks brought a flurry of activity as the house neared its final completion. Furniture arrived from Denver, some pieces selected by Hayes, others crafted by Zara herself. The kitchen was outfitted with the finest stove money could buy, the pantry stocked with provisions, the cellar filled with preserved foods for the coming winter. As the first snow dusted the Colorado landscape, Hayes planned a housewarming celebration. The entire ranch staff was invited, along with select townspeople from Greeley who had been supportive of the project. Zara found herself both excited and nervous. This would be her first public appearance alongside Hayes in their new capacity as a courting couple. The evening of the gathering arrived with perfect weather, cold but clear, with stars shining like diamonds against the black velvet sky. Lanterns illuminated the path from the barn where guests left their conveyances to the welcoming porch of the new house. Inside, fires crackled in both the parlor and dining room fireplaces, casting a warm glow over the assembled company. Widow Simmons was among the first to arrive, her initial concerns about propriety somewhat allayed by Hayes's obvious respect for Zara and his honorable intentions. The mercantile owner and his wife came bearing a housewarming gift, a fine clock for the mantelpiece. Frank and Martha bustled about, helping serve refreshments and beaming with pride at the transformation of the ranch. The most gratifying reactions, however, came from the men who had worked on the house. Joseph, Thomas, and Elijah arrived together, clearly impressed by the finished product of their labor. "Miss Patterson," Joseph said, shaking her hand firmly, "I'll admit I had my doubts when we started, but you've proved yourself 10 times over. This house is something to be proud of." "We all are," Thomas added, "and we've been telling folks in town about it too. You shouldn't have trouble finding work after this." Their acceptance meant more to Zara than she could express. "Thank you," she said simply. "It was a privilege to work with all of you." The evening progressed with food, music, and conversation flowing freely. Zara found herself continuously aware of Hayes's presence, his deep laugh from across the room, his attentive manner with each guest, the occasional glance he sent her way, full of private meaning. Near the end of the evening, Hayes called for attention, standing in the center of the parlor with a glass raised. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, "and for your support during this project. When I first announced my intention to have Miss Patterson build my home, there were doubts expressed." A ripple of acknowledging laughter moved through the gathering. "But as you can see, those doubts were entirely unfounded." He gestured around the beautiful room. "This house represents not just my success with the ranch, but a vision for the future. A future that, I'm pleased to say, now includes someone special." His gaze found Zara, and warmth flooded her cheeks as all eyes turned toward her. "Miss Patterson has consented to allow me to court her properly, and I couldn't be happier." A murmur of surprise followed by congratulations filled the room. Zara moved to Hayes's side, accepting his outstretched hand with a mixture of embarrassment and pleasure. "To new beginnings," Hayes proposed, raising his glass higher. "To new beginnings," the guests echoed, lifting their own glasses in response. As the party concluded and guests departed into the crisp night, Zara found herself lingering, reluctant to leave the house that had become so much a part of her. Hayes found her in the study, running her fingers along the bookshelves she had crafted. "They're perfect," he said, watching her from the doorway. "Just like everything else you've built here." Zara turned to him with a smile. "Not quite everything. There are still projects I could undertake. The back porch could use a swing, and I've been thinking about a proper desk for this room." Hayes crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. "Zara Patterson, are you looking for excuses to keep working on my house?" "Perhaps," she admitted. "It's hard to let go of something you've poured so much of yourself into." "Then don't," Hayes said simply. Zara looked at him questioningly. "What do you mean?" "I mean that this house was always meant to be shared. I'd like it to be your home too when you're ready, whether that's weeks from now or months or—" He paused, then continued more softly, "or years. I'll wait." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within Zara. In the months they had worked together, Hayes had never once treated her as less than his equal. He had valued her skills, respected her independence, and now offered her a future on her own terms. "I don't think I'll need years," she said, squeezing his hands gently. "But I do need to establish myself professionally, to know that I can succeed on my own merits." "Of course," Hayes agreed immediately. "You should open that shop in town we discussed. Build your reputation. I'll support you however I can." His understanding confirmed what Zara already knew in her heart, that Hayes Vaughn was a man unlike any she had met before. A man who saw her strength as an asset rather than a threat, who wanted her to succeed as much as he desired her company. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Hayes drew her closer, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. "I'm the one who should be thanking you. for this house, for taking a chance on me, for showing everyone what you're capable of." Their kiss was deeper this time, a promise of things to come, of a partnership built on mutual respect and growing affection. Winter settled over Colorado, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland of white. Zara, true to her word, rented a small storefront in Greeley and established her carpentry business. Word of her success with Hayes's house had spread, and she soon found herself with a steady stream of orders, first small repairs and simple furniture, then increasingly complex commissions. Hayes visited town frequently, ostensibly on ranch business but inevitably finding his way to Zara's shop. Their courtship progressed with proper decorum but genuine passion, each discovering in the other a complementary spirit. Hayes admired Zara's precision and creativity. Zara appreciated Hayes's steady strength and quiet intelligence. By spring, Zara had saved enough from her earnings to purchase proper equipment for her shop and hire an apprentice, a young man named David, who showed both aptitude and respect for her expertise. With her business established, she felt increasingly ready to consider Hayes's proposal more seriously. One April evening, as they walked together along the creek near the cottonwood grove that had become their special place, Hayes stopped and turned to her. "Zara," he began, his voice unusually solemn, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. I know we agreed to take our time, to let you establish yourself first, but I find myself growing impatient." Before Zara could respond, Hayes knelt on one knee, drawing a small box from his pocket. "I've been carrying this with me for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Zara Patterson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of sharing the home we built together and building a life alongside it?" Zara looked down at the man before her, strong, kind, respectful, and at the simple but elegant ring he offered. In that moment, all her remaining doubts dissolved. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Hayes Vaughn." Hayes slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to embrace her, lifting her off her feet in his enthusiasm. Their laughter echoed across the water, joyous and free. "When?" he asked as he set her down. "I don't want to wait through another season." "Neither do I," Zara admitted. "Summer, perhaps, when the wildflowers are in bloom." "June," Hayes decided. "We'll be married here on the ranch with the house as our backdrop, the house you built." The following weeks were filled with preparations. News of their engagement spread quickly through Greeley, met largely with approval and even some smugness from those who claimed to have predicted it all along. Zara continued her work at the shop, training David to handle basic tasks in her absence. She also spent time completing one final project for the house, a dining table large enough for family gatherings, crafted from oak with intricate detail work along the edges. It was her wedding gift to Hayes, a symbol of the meals and conversations they would share over the years to come. June arrived with perfect weather, warm days, cool evenings, and meadows bursting with colorful wildflowers. Zara moved her belongings to the ranch house the week before the wedding, setting up a workspace in a small outbuilding Hayes had prepared for her. Though she intended to maintain her shop in town, having a place at the ranch to work on personal projects felt right. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, the sky an impossible blue above the rolling hills of the V. Zara dressed in the upstairs bedroom that would soon be theirs, assisted by Martha and Widow Simmons. Her gown was simple but elegant ivory silk with delicate lace trim, neither too fussy nor too plain. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Simmons declared, adjusting Zara's veil. "Your parents would be so proud." The thought of her father brought a momentary pang of sadness. How he would have loved to see this day, to walk her down the aisle, to know she had found happiness without compromising who she was. As if reading her thoughts, Martha squeezed her hand. "They're watching over you," she said softly. "Both of them." Zara nodded, blinking back tears. "I know." The ceremony took place in the front yard with the house as a backdrop, just as Hayes had envisioned. Guests sat on wooden benches Zara had designed specifically for the occasion. In lieu of a family member to give her away, Zara had asked Joseph to escort her, a gesture that symbolized the bridge between her professional achievements and her personal happiness. Hayes waited beneath an arch twined with wildflowers, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to wonder as Zara appeared. The minister from Greeley's small church officiated, his words celebrating not just the union of two people, but the joining of two independent spirits in mutual respect and love. "I, Hayes, take you, Zara, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Hayes vowed, his voice strong and sure. "I promise to honor your independence, to support your dreams, and to build a life with you founded on respect and love." Zara's own vows echoed his sentiments, adding, "I promise to create alongside you, to build not just structures but memories, traditions, and a legacy we can both be proud of." As they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, a spontaneous cheer rose from the assembled guests. Hayes kissed Zara with a tenderness that belied his strength, sealing their commitment beneath the Colorado sky. The celebration that followed was joyous, and informal tables set up under the trees, music provided by ranch hands with unexpected talents, food prepared by Martha and several women from town. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the land, Hayes led Zara onto a cleared space for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy?" he asked, holding her close. "Beyond words," Zara replied, resting her head against his chest. "This is more than I ever imagined for myself." "It's just the beginning," Hayes promised. "We have a lifetime of building ahead of us." Later that night, after the guests had departed and quiet settled over the ranch, Hayes carried Zara across the threshold of their home. The house that had begun as a professional commission had become the foundation for their shared future, a tangible manifestation of respect, collaboration, and love. In the years that followed, the V prospered under Hayes's careful management, while Zara's reputation as a master carpenter spread throughout Colorado. She maintained her shop in town, training several apprentices who went on to establish their own businesses, while also creating special pieces for their home and occasionally collaborating with Hayes on ranch improvements. Their first child, a son they named James Henry Vaughn, arrived a year after their wedding, bringing new joy to the household. He was followed 2 years later by twin daughters, Emily and Laura, who inherited their mother's determination and their father's steady nature. As the children grew, they filled the house with laughter and activity. James showed an early interest in ranching, following Hayes around the property from the time he could walk, while Emily displayed a natural aptitude for woodworking, spending hours in Zara's workshop learning to use tools with the same precision as her mother. Laura, the quieter twin, revealed a talent for drawing and design, often sketching improvements for the ranch buildings or furniture ideas that Zara would help her bring to life. The dining table Zara had crafted as a wedding gift became the center of family life, a place for meals, conversations, lessons, and celebrations. 10 years after their wedding, as they sat together on the back porch swing Zara had finally built, watching their children play in the yard, Hayes squeezed her hand gently. "You remember what I said when we first met?" he asked. "When those men were laughing at you for carrying a hammer?" Zara smiled at the memory. You said, then she'll build my home. I had no idea then how prophetic those words would be, Hayes mused. You didn't just build this house, Zara. You built our home, our family, our life together. We built it together, Zara corrected, leaning against his shoulder. That's what makes it strong. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold, they sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the tangible evidence of their partnership, the strong walls of the house, the thriving ranch, the healthy children, and most importantly, the unbreakable bond between them. Zara Patterson had defied convention by carrying a hammer, but in doing so, she had constructed more than buildings. She had crafted a life on her own terms, found a love based on respect rather than traditional roles, and created a legacy that would endure long after the last nail was driven. And Hayes Vaughn, who had once been alone with nothing but a dream of home, had found not just a builder for his house but a partner for his journey, a woman whose strength complemented his own, whose vision expanded his horizons, and whose love filled every corner of the home they had built together. In the growing town of Greeley, their story became something of a legend, how a woman with a hammer and a man with land had constructed not just a house, but a testament to what was possible when people were judged not by convention but by character, not by gender but by ability. They had built something rare and precious, a home founded on respect, a marriage based on partnership, a family centered on love. And it had all begun with a hammer, a laugh, and a man who saw possibility where others saw only the breaking of tradition.